Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and I am back with you today for another Tales of Production, or Tales from Production, whatever I end up calling these videos. Largely from my little closet of secrets back there, which contains a lot of samples and components that we tested during the design and production process for all of our games. I just filmed a video about Rolling Realms, and right now I'm going to do a video about Red Rising. So Red Rising actually has two versions of it, which I'll talk about in this video. There's a collector's edition here, and there is also a retail version on my desk as well. And I have a big box of components that I'm going to talk about as they relate to the Red Rising design and production process. Let's start out with the roots of Red Rising. So Red Rising, if you're not familiar with it, is a book series by Pierce Brown. And I got hooked on this book series back in, I believe, 2014, then 2015, 2016. He had a new book come out pretty much every year for a while. And part of my intrigue, or my interest in the book, was the societal structure in this world, in this dystopian future called the Society. The whole idea in Red Rising is that people have been genetically engineered into what is essentially different castes based on color, which is not the color of their skin, even though their different colors often manifest in their skin or hair or eye colors. So it's not like ethnicities or races in our world. They're genetically engineered caste. And so there's like a green section of society that are created to be scientists. And there's at the top of the pile are these gold characters who are the elite. They are the elite kind of leading society. Below them are silvers and coppers and so on, all the way down to reds at the bottom. And so this societal structure really intrigued me. And so many of my initial attempts to design a Red Rising game were using meeples. There are 14 different colors, and so I had 14 different colors of meeples that I was trying to do different things with, whether they were worker placement. There were a number of them that were bag building. I thought, okay, I've seen bag building games have a bunch of different colors. Let's put a bunch of different colors of meeples in bags and have you pull them out of the bag and do stuff with them. And so during that time, I had these components. I actually have a bunch more in the closet here because I bought different meeples of all 14 colors from Meeple Source and used them for some of the early attempts at the game. That didn't end up working out. One of the big reasons those versions of the game, in my opinion, didn't work out is that I felt so distant from the characters in the books. Even if I tried to get those characters into the game, I just felt really disconnected from them. And that's the exact opposite feeling I get from reading the Red Rising books. When I read the Red Rising books, I feel very connected to the characters, whether I like or dislike them and the decisions they're making. I feel very connected to them. And so looking down at a big pile of meeples just did not feel like I was operating or existing in the Red Rising universe. And so I moved away from the meeples, ended up using cards in the game, and I'll show you some of those cards in a second. But since we're talking about cards and characters, let's get to them. So I ended up having the game focus on characters. So these are some samples. Here's some of the gold foil samples that we tested out. I actually tested it out after production. Now, I'll show you why in a second. So here's some of the early ones. Actually, I do have some. I don't have many prototype components left, but I actually do have some here. So I have a big pile of prototype cards here. So these are many of the cards that we tested out early on. This is what the prototype looked like. No art, just roughly the format of the final cards, but they were pretty small. You can see the final cards ended up being much bigger. I'll show you a comparison. So in the prototype, they were this big, and the final cards look like this. So we wanted the cards to be as big as possible to give room for the art and all the other information that needed to be on the cards. And so we went with a Seven Wonders size card. These are 65 by 100 millimeter size cards. Much bigger than, as you can see, the prototype here. And part of that came from the feedback during the prototype. Even though it's just a prototype, people often end up giving feedback about the components anyway. Many people said, I hope the cards in the final version are bigger because these feel so small. It seems so restricted to have just a little bit of art there, whereas you can see in the final version, there's plenty of room for the art. Let's see if the camera can actually focus on this. I don't know if it's going to do it. So yeah, actually, it's a nice surprise to see as I dig through here that there are some components from the original version of the game. I even have some of the houses here. Originally, the houses had the instructions for what you do in the game on it. We ended up moving those to a separate reference card in the final version of the game. Oh, and this is interesting. I don't even remember what these were. I have, let's see, House Triton, House Mars. This might have been a way to randomize the different houses early on. Earth. Yeah, actually, I don't remember. There are many versions of the game so that I tested out while prototyping. So I have no idea what these were doing in earlier versions of the prototype. So yeah, and we ended up going with these big cards, and you can see, I'll show you what some of them look like. Some of the early production tests of these cards look like this. This is, I think, when we were testing the gold foil, and we didn't have art for all of them yet. But we thought a lot about the oh yeah, okay, here's a good example. I'm glad this came up. So we were debating between going with foil, this is for the collector's edition version, foil behind the text on the cards versus foil intaglio here in the sidebar. And we ended up going with a little bit of a hybrid between the two. I didn't like the foil in the background, even though it's very flashy. From across the table with the wrong tilt of the card, you can almost see it flashing here in the light. You can't read the text. Not that you really can read the text from across the table anyway for Red Rising, but I didn't want that to be an impediment for people, an accessibility impediment essentially. So, and I also really like the detailed look of the foil here on the sidebar. One thing we ended up doing in the final version, though, is that we actually made the word gold foil as well. And that may have been a mistake because, as it turns out, let's see if so I also have some normal cards in here. Here's some normal early versions of the cards, even though they look pretty much done. You can see there's no backs to them. And part of this was us testing out the sidebar and information that we convey in the sidebar there. But what actually ended up happening here, I'll pull out what it looks like here in the final version, is that at the right angle, if you're really looking for it, you can actually see the word gold on some of these cards. Yeah, so here's Mustang here. So you can see in the final version, this is the final version of Mustang, looks like this, and you can see, let's see if I can get it. Okay, there you go. You can see the word gold flashing up there. So we ended up adding gold foil up there. And it's really, really tough to tell, but at the right angle, let's see if you can see it on camera here. The right angle, the word or parts of the word gold can kind of shine through. Yeah, I can kind of see it at a very, very distinct angle here. I don't know if I can be able to replicate it on camera, but some people notice this and were like, hey, you can kind of see the word gold from the back of the card, and you don't want that. You don't want people to be able to see that information from the back of the card. Like I said, it's very tough to see this, but it's something that we didn't discover until after we made the game. And it's something important to keep in mind in the future. And so some of these samples that I mentioned that I had from after production, we were testing if it was an issue, if we didn't have linen cards. So if we didn't put a linen on the cards to add that extra nice feel to the cards, if the word gold would come through. Or if we applied the linen to the cards afterward. That's what these look like. These are linen applied after the gold stamping happens. But this doesn't look as good. I think this looks kind of pixelated. You can't really tell here, but the intaglio, the gold intaglio looks a little pixelated. And the linen is just nicer. It's just a nicer card than non-linen cards. So I think if we did this again in the future, I would definitely look for it quite a bit during the testing process, but I would also maybe just not put the word gold in foil, because that's the key part. You can't really see the sidebar gold through the card, or you cannot do that. So it's really just that word and the way something about the stamping of that word shines through a little bit on the backside. What else do I have to share here from my box of samples? So so the story about the dice here. Let's see, I have some of the dice. So the game comes with one die. You have one rising die that you roll at different times. This was added during the design process as it relates to your ability to sometimes draw cards from the top of the deck, or you often have that option of drawing a card from the top of the deck instead of taking a face-up card from the board. Red Rising is a hand-building game, and so you start out with this hand of cards, and you're trying to craft that hand over the course of the game to end up with a really powerful hand at the end of the game. And so you have these face-up cards on the board, and they are supposed to be the main focus of the game, these face-up cards, but you can draw the top card of the deck. And we realized during the design process that people were doing that more than we wanted them to, and so we added a random element to it. So if you take a card from the top of the deck, you have to roll the die to determine what bonus you're going to get, because each of the other cards, other locations that you could gain from have a specific bonus. So there's a randomized bonus here. So you lose a little bit of agency if you draw from the top card of the deck, just as you are losing agency by drawing the top card, a random card, instead of taking a face-up card. So we're kind of pointing players in this direction we want them to take, while still giving them the option if they aren't interested in any of those face-up cards. I mentioned the dice here specifically because during the design process, we changed the icon for helium. And this was a dangerous thing to do, and we probably shouldn't have done it, because let's see if I have it here. Yeah, so originally, the helium icon looked like this, and the reason for that is because the helium tokens in the game, which you can kind of see through this wolf head insert that comes with the game, this insert tray, this matches what these tokens look like. However, at some point, I can't remember exactly when, we decided that this icon was better. We decided this was a better fit for the game. Or the other way around. I can't even remember exactly at this point which way it went. But basically what happened is that this icon ended up all over the game, except for the die itself. And so the die that's included in the game has this icon on it. Fortunately, it's very clear what this icon is referring to, even though the rulebook uses a different icon, and the reference cards use a different icon. Even the score pad here, you can see the score pad has this icon on it. But this was a good reminder to me to boost our proofreading and oversight process a bit, to catch stuff like this, because I didn't even think to look for this once we got to the proofreading stage. And proofreaders didn't know what the die was actually going to look like. The die in the rulebook itself has the other icon. So a good reminder to me, A, be careful about changing icons during the process, especially after you've already started to test specific components that use those icons. And also, if you are going to change icons, have a really good proofreading and oversight process where those proofreaders can see everything involved in the game from start to finish, from the earliest copy-edited rulebook to what the final components actually look like and the samples for those components. So that really helped us improve our process by testing, by missing this in Red Rising. Fortunately, it is not something that it's not a grievous error, I think. I'm digging through here to see the other things. So one of the things we tested was this. This is interesting. So this is the gold version of the Sovereign token. So both versions of the game have this Sovereign token, and this isn't actually gold, it's metal. But the collector's edition has this metal version. And one of the things that we had to change over time on this, I don't know if I have past versions here. Looks like I don't. Is that some of these points were a little too pointy. And so one of the things that Panda tests for is literally like pointiness of plastic and metal objects so they can't hurt anyone. So we had to like round out these edges a little bit to make sure that they weren't too pointy. So you don't often think about that in terms of games and miniatures, but a good manufacturer will test things like that. We'll test to see if someone could accidentally get hurt from a component. What else should we test here, or should we look at? Oh yeah, so here's one of the earliest batch of samples that I got. So these are just little white plastic tokens that show the different shapes and sizes of what the tokens will be. These sizes are pretty close to what the final version ended up being, except for this die. This was an earlier version of the Rising die. This is the size of a normal D6 compared to the final dice, which ended up being a lot bigger. So we tested that out fairly early on. Panda sends us these color samples. So a big decision in the game was which colors do we want players to have. So here are these kind of plastic color plates to decide. I'm missing one here. I don't know where the other one is. But there's 6 of these in the game, 6-player game. And so we use this, and I use an app for colorblind testing to see if we're looking at these different colors, if they are easily distinguishable from one another, if they look good, and if colorblindness, people with colorblindness can still tell the difference between them. There aren't many times in Red Rising where you need to be able to differentiate components in terms of color blindness, where that's a factor, but it is something that we wanted to think about. And so here are the plastic tokens as they ended up being, matching those colors. All these tokens here. And the plastic ones ended up really good. However, I decided at a certain point that I wanted all metal for the collector's edition. This is where some of the problems arose that you may have heard about the game. It is fine, but it's not necessarily ideal. So I got all these metal token samples. Pull them out here. Hopefully this crinkle doesn't add to the mic too much. So got all these metal token samples, and as you can see, some of them are very similar to one another. So this is the green and the blue. On camera, I mean, they're very, very close on camera. And here's the red and the pink. Yeah, the red and the pink right here. So red and pink right there. Again, very, very similar. And I think this would have been fine. And the reason these were so similar is because, I hope I'm using the right word here, but these are adonized metal. So they're not painted metal tokens, because I personally think that unpainted metal looks better. This is the actual color of the metal, not something that might as well be a plastic token, but heavier, based on what the paint looks like. However, if you do that, if you have adonized metal, you are very limited as to the colors that you can choose for it. And so I thought about the way the game is played and how these tokens are used, and I decided this is good enough. These colors are good enough. But they really aren't, because, like you can see in low lighting, these are pretty hard to tell apart. And when you play the collector's edition of Red Rising, you put these tokens you can put them in different areas to keep them separate and see, okay, this is my little pile of tokens, this is your little pile of tokens. So you can totally do that. It works totally, it definitely works fine, but it is not ideal because we went with this adonized approach. And so we are making painted versions of these tokens. That was loud. We're making painted versions of these tokens so that they are more easily differentiable. And so they're painted metal tokens. That should be better. But that was a good lesson to me that I shouldn't let aesthetics get in the way of utility for a game. Even though I think the non-painted versions look better, they are not as functional as painted tokens that match the colors of the plastic tokens. That was a great lesson for me to learn there. And part of that lesson is tied to how the insert worked out. So here is the insert in the collector's edition of Red Rising. You'll see this insert here. Nice insert. I think it's a great insert design overall, except the lid did not account for all these little compartments. So here's what the lid looks like. Hopefully you can kind of see it here. It's a very basic lid to the insert, pretty flat, some grooves to hold the board in place. And the lid, when you tilt this box on the side, is not meant to keep all these little components in these little containers. And so when you tilt this box on the side, all these little metal tokens they don't always do it, but they can fall out of these slots. And because the colors are so similar, then you have to sort through them very carefully. Tokens that are very difficult to distinguish the differences between them. So that's why here's actually the sample of the metal tokens. These are metal tokens that are painted, and so they're much more easily to differentiate and distinguish. And so this was a good reminder to me, many lessons learned with this copy of Red Rising, that the insert top is just as important as the insert itself, and should not be overlooked. So we learned that kind of the hard way with Red Rising. Yeah, that was unfortunate to learn it that way, but that is how it goes. And forgetting now, there is actually a method to put this in the box so that they don't come out as much. Yeah, so if you put the insert in the box, I'll show you the direction in a second, the tokens are less likely to spill out, but I still would not store this thing vertically. So if you put the insert in this way, I'll show you with the rule book, put the insert in this way, and the tokens stay in there a little bit better. What else do we have about Red Rising? There's we also have the card holders. So I really wanted card holders in the collector's edition. This one's a little bit hard to see. I'll pull out one of the plastic ones. So here is a plastic card holder because I wanted players to be able to put their cards in this little card holder and then have their hands free to do other things during the game. I really like a good card holder when I'm playing games. However, because we chose such big cards in the game, like small cards are held up pretty just fine by this. But big cards kind of weigh it down so much that if you tip the top of a big card, the whole thing can fall over. So I like these card holders a lot, but I wish they didn't fall over quite as easily. So another thing that I didn't even think to test during the creation process of those card holders. So a lot of lessons learned with the Red Rising Collector's Edition. Let me show you the retail version as well so you can see the difference. I like really what we did with the retail version. We wanted two versions of this because we figured we wanted to cater both to gamers and Red Rising fans alike. And I thought among Red Rising fans, there might be those who aren't used to spending a lot of money on a game and might be more comfortable with a $40 price point than a $65 price point. And there also might be Red Rising fans that are collectors and they want the nicest version of it. And I thought the same for gamers who are trying out the game. So this is a $40 version of Red Rising that has same rulebook, the same house tiles, the same board, but they don't have, it has a more basic insert, which we did make red for Red Rising. It has plastic tokens instead of metal. It has cards, but no gold foil cards. And everything else is the same in here. You still have the wolf head tray. So it was an interesting part of the process to decide, okay, what do we put in the collector's edition to make it super special, and what do we keep in the retail version so that it still feels like a full version of the game. And it is. There's no gameplay differences at all here between the two. It's just slight component differences between them. And you can even go on our website and buy, if you get the retail version, you realize, okay, I want the metal tokens. You can go on our website and buy those metal tokens, buy the card holders, things like that. Yes, I think that's all. That's all the stuff that I have here about Red Rising to discuss. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions in the comments below. If you have any thoughts or questions about the collector's edition, all these different things that I debated during the production process of the game, things that I missed, I welcome those questions and comments below. Thanks.